The veterinarian's face lost all color when he saw what the dog had delivered. The events that followed stunned everyone present. The vet had anticipated an ordinary day. Just a standard examination, a slightly weary shepherd dog, nothing out of the ordinary. However, as the first puppies emerged, his hands froze. The blood drained from his face, and a cold dread settled in his chest. He had witnessed hundreds of births, yet never anything like this. Silence filled the room. Only the dog's quiet whimpers pierced the air. The owner gripped the table's edge, feeling his heart drop into a void. Something was wrong, and this wrongness was breathing right in front of them. The morning had begun peacefully. The village veterinary clinic smelled of cleanliness and medicine. Dr. Harris, a man with a gentle voice and weary eyes, was checking his instruments out of habit when the door suddenly flew open. A farmer stood on the threshold, a tall, tan man around 50, with weather-beaten hands and anxiety in his eyes. On the leash was a German shepherd, breathing heavily, with trembling legs and a massive belly. "Help," the man rasped. "She is doing poorly." Harris realized immediately this wasn't just a simple delivery. The animal looked drained. Her breathing was irregular, and her eyes had lost their shine. He scooped the dog up under her chest and carefully placed her on the metal table. The nurse switched on the lamp. The light hit her eyes, reflecting off her damp with sweat. "She is in labor," Harris stated calmly. "But something isn't right." The farmer squeezed his cap in his hands. "She is like family to me. Don't let her die." Dr. Harris nodded, sensing the rising tension. With every passing minute, the dog's respiration became more labored. Muscles contracted spasmodically, yet no puppies appeared. Harris glanced at the clock, administered medication, and checked her pulse. The heartbeat was erratic. "Get everything ready," he said briefly. "We are beginning." The nurse brought a towel, and gloves rustled. The air became thick with anxiety. Then, the first squeak, a tiny bundle of life slipped from the doctor's hand. But when Harris looked at it, his blood ran cold. He couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. The puppy was alive, but it looked peculiar, as if not fully formed. The doctor slowly raised his gaze to the farmer. "They are living," he said softly. "Well, something here is completely wrong." The room filled with noises. Brief commands, the rustling of gloves, muffled gasps. Dr. Harris didn't take his eyes off the dog. His fingers moved rapidly, yet caution was evident in every motion. The shepherd breathed heavily, tucking her paws as if trying to escape the pain. "Breathe, girl," the farmer whispered. He stood at her head. "You are strong. We are together. Do you hear me?" The next puppy appeared a few minutes later. And again, the same situation. Weak, tiny, as if born far too early. Fur in patches, skin pinkish, breathing intermittent. The nurse carefully wiped him with a towel while the doctor was already preparing for the next one. "This does not look like a normal delivery," Harris muttered. Heartbeats were uneven, contractions chaotic. Her body was exhausted. He knew that any delay could cost the life not only of the puppies but also of the mother. With every new wave of contractions, a tremor ran through the shepherd's body. Her paws slid against the metal of the table. The veterinarian pressed his hand to her side, feeling movement within. "More puppies." "How many are there?" the nurse asked. "More than 6. Maybe 8. Maybe more." The farmer went pale. "She won't survive this." "She will," Harris said firmly, though he wasn't sure himself. "We won't let her give up." He gave an injection, trying to stabilize her breathing. She whined quietly. Her eyes flashed for a moment, full of suffering and trust. At that moment, the doctor felt how heavy the burden is to be the one responsible for life when everything hangs by a thread. The minutes dragged on like an eternity. Each new puppy entered the world with that same strange appearance. Hesitant movements, barely audible squeaks. It seemed nature itself had made a mistake. Rushing their birth. When the 5th was born, Harris lost his composure for the first time. He simply froze, holding the newborn in his hands. The small body breathed but looked as if created from fragile glass, weak, too light, with thin limbs and sparse fur. "Doctor." The farmer's voice trembled. "What is with him?" Harris didn't answer immediately. He silently placed the puppy on a warm towel, covered it with his palm, and took a deep breath. His face had turned pale. "They are alive," he finally said. "But their bodies are undeveloped. This isn't just weakness, it is something else." Silence reigned in the room. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath. The nurse exchanged a worried glance with her colleague. The farmer took a step forward, looking at his tiny creatures moving feebly on the table. "These are my puppies. They are alive," he whispered, as if defending against fear. "That is all that matters." The doctor looked at him with a long, weary gaze. "Yes," he said quietly, "but they need more than just hope." Meanwhile, people had already started gathering outside. In the small village, news spreads fast. Someone had seen the farmer rushing down the road with the dog in his arms. Someone had heard strange cries from the clinic. Now neighbors stood near their windows, exchanging glances and whispers. "They say she gave birth to freaks. Or miracles. Who knows?" These words seeped through their walls, intensifying the anxiety inside. The farmer clenched his fists. "Let them talk," he whispered. "My likeliator. She is just a mom who is fighting." Dr. Harris looked at him and nodded. "Then we will fight together." He began issuing orders. The nurse turned on heating lamps. Someone was preparing formula, someone was spreading out soft blankets. The room came alive again. Instead of fear, concentration took over. And when another weak squeak sounded from under the towel, Harris allowed himself to smile for the first time all day. Tiredly, but genuinely. "They are living," he said softly, "and that is the main thing." By evening, the clinic had turned into a small island of hope amidst a storm. People crowded outside, but inside, a deathly silence prevailed. Every rustle, every sigh was audible. The nurse quietly wiped the table. The farmer stood without blinking, while Dr. Harris sat on his haunches near the puppies, illuminated by the warm light of the lamp. On a metal tray lay 8 tiny bodies, alive, but so weak they seemed transparent. They barely moved, emitting thin squeaks. One puppy, slightly stronger than the rest, tried to crawl, clinging to the towel with tiny paws. "Just like that, little one, keep trying," the farmer whispered, as if praying. The doctor brought a dropper with a nutrient solution to him. "They need constant warmth, and we will have to feed them every 2 hours, even at night." The farmer nodded, not looking away. "I am not leaving here. Don't you dare chase me out." The doctor looked at him wearily but gently. "No one is chasing you. I am just warning you, it will be hard." The dog, Elira, lay nearby, eyes half closed. She breathed quietly, but more evenly than before. When the squeak of the puppies reached her, she tried to turn her head, as if wanting to make sure they were close. The farmer cautiously sank to his knees beside her. His hand rested on her fur. "Everything is okay, girl. They are living. We will manage, do you hear?" His voice trembled. Dr. Harris watched this scene with a kind of inner awe. He had worked with animals for many years, seen suffering, seen death. But this picture, man and dog connected by one pain and one hope, pierced him to the very heart. A few hours later, when the births had ended, a strange silence fell. All the puppies were out in the world, 9 of them. Of these, 3 looked especially weak. "We need to warm these ones urgently," Harris said, pointing. "Without heat, they won't survive until morning." The nurse switched on an infrared lamp, and red light filled the room with a soft glow. The air grew warmer. The farmer leaned over the small lumps, holding his palms over them, as if trying to transfer his own warmth to them. "They are so tiny," he whispered. "As if not ready for life." "Maybe," Harris replied. "But sometimes it is exactly those ones who survive, the ones the world considers too weak." The farmer smiled faintly. Then they will survive, I promise them. Voices were heard from outside. Some of the neighbors were trying to peek into the window. They say the doctor got scared, that he turned as pale as a corpse. Or maybe they aren't dogs at all, but something else. The farmer turned sharply toward the door, his eyes flashing. Let them shut up, he exhaled. No one dares speak of her like that. Harris approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't pay attention. People fear what they don't understand. Tomorrow everything will be different. But the night turned out to be long. Neither the farmer nor the doctor left. They fed the little ones from droppers, changed towels, and counted breaths. Sometimes it seemed that one stopped breathing, and the hearts of both men clenched, but then a weak squeak returned life to the air. Closer to midnight, Harris felt fatigue weighing down like a heavy load. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at the farmer sitting on the floor by the lamp. The man was rocking one of the puppies in his palms, smiling barely noticeably. You know, the doctor said quietly, I have seen real miracles. Sometimes life clings to us, even when we don't believe it is possible. The farmer raised his eyes. Determination shone in them. Then today we will see one more. Their night passed in endless small tasks. Warming the milk, turning over a weak baby, checking the mother's breathing. Outside the window, dawn broke. The first rays of the sun lay on the windows, and the red light of the lamp grew dim. Dr. Harris looked at the puppies. All 9 were breathing. Weakly, but breathing. He pressed his lips together to hide a smile. They endured, he said. At least this night, but they endured. The farmer lowered his head to Leary and whispered quietly, Do you hear, girl? Our children are alive. And when she feebly moved her tail, a quiet laugh rang out in the room for the first time in 24 hours, hoarse, tired, but genuine. Morning brought not relief, but new trials. The sun's first rays had barely touched the clinic windows when Dr. Harris realized the struggle was only beginning. Several puppies were moving feebly, their breathing was becoming intermittent. He noticed immediately that 2 of them were cooling down faster than the others. Don't give up, little one, he muttered, massaging the fragile body. You already survived the night, you can manage the day too. The farmer stood nearby. His eyes were red from insomnia. He didn't step away for a minute. In his hands was a small bottle of milk formula, which he held like something holy. Every sip, every drop, felt like a chance to survive. Doctor, he whispered, you won't let them go, right? Harris sighed, wearily but firmly, as long as they are breathing, no. The clinic breathed warmth, but outside its walls, the cold of human rumors grew. The crowd near the doors increased. People brought food, candles, some just curiosity, and more whispers. They said the puppies were sick or bewitched. Or maybe it was a sign. Every word felt like a knife in the farmer's heart. He heard them, even without going outside, and each time he repeated to himself, they are just children, they are just living. Harris saw how hard it was for him. Therefore, when by noon it became clear that the puppies needed more warmth, he made a decision. We will move them home. It is too noisy here. There it will be quieter, warmer. The farmer blinked in surprise. Home. To my place. Yes, but I will go with you. I won't abandon them now. So, an hour later, they stood at his old house on the edge of the village. A simple wooden hut, painted a faded green, with large windows and the scent of hay. Inside was a stove, an old armchair, and a table covered with stains from milk and herbs. Lyra lay on a blanket by the stove, and on a tray next to her were her children, tiny as a breath. Harris set up the lamp, checked the temperature, and mixed the formula. The room filled with soft red light and the smell of warm milk. Now everything depends on us, he said. The day passed in an endless repetition of simple actions, feeding, wiping, checking respiration. Sometimes the farmer caught himself thinking he had stopped distinguishing time. Only the beating of hearts and the rustle of the puppy's breathing. By evening, one of the little ones stopped moving. The farmer lifted him into his hands, hoping to feel movement. But the puppy was motionless. He froze, looking into the small face, as if he didn't believe it. "Doctor, he is just sleeping." Harris silently removed his glasses and shook his head. The farmer didn't cry immediately, he just sank to the floor and quietly stroked the warm body, as if afraid to chase away the last spark of life. "You fought, didn't you?" he whispered. "I saw it, and that means you lived for real." Lyra raised her head, let out a quiet moan, and pulled herself closer. Her nose touched the dead puppy. For a moment, it became impossible to breathe in the room. Even the doctor turned away to hide his tears. But through the pain came something else. Determination. The farmer stood up, wiped his face with his sleeve, and looked at the remaining 8. "We won't give up for anything," and he didn't give up. Not at night, not in the morning. On the second day, 2 puppies began to breathe more evenly. Their squeaking became louder. One even tried to crawl toward his mother. Harris noticed and smiled for the first time in a long while. "Look," he said. "They are starting to fight on their own." The farmer laughed through his fatigue. The laughter sounded strange, like a long-forgotten sound of life. "Means they have your character, doctor." Harris shook his head. "No, it isn't medicine saving them, but the fact that they feel love nearby." The days merged into one. People stopped whispering and started coming to help. They brought warm rags, milk, lamps. Someone just stood silently at the threshold, looking with respect at the farmer, who almost never slept. And then, a week later, a miracle happened. One of the puppies, the weakest one, opened his eyes for the first time. Small blue dots shone under the light of the lamp. He turned his head toward the farmer, as if recognizing him. The man froze in disbelief, and then laughed and cried simultaneously. "He sees," he shouted. "Doctor, he is looking at me." Harris approached, smiling. "This is a good sign. It means the brain has started to work correctly. They are growing." In that evening, no one spoke of fear. Everyone just watched as 8 tiny creatures, against all odds, breathed, moved, and clung to life. Late at night, the farmer fell asleep right by the stove. Lyra lay nearby, her breathing steady and calm. The puppies, curled into a ball, slept under the lamp. Harris stood by the window, looking at the moon, and thought, how strangely the world is arranged. Sometimes the weakest ones give the strongest lesson. He said quietly, looking at their slumber, "The world needs to know that miracles happen." They just arrive in silence. A week passed. The small house on the edge of the village turned into a place where people came not out of curiosity, but for hope. Those who had recently whispered about a curse now brought food for Lyra, milk for the puppies, and just stood silently by the door, observing how life conquers fear. The farmer hardly slept. Shadows lay under his eyes, his hands trembled from exhaustion, but a quiet pride appeared in his gaze. He fed the puppies in turn, monitored the mother's breathing. He memorized every squeak. Harris drove over every day, checking the condition of the little ones, and more often his brows relaxed. "They are growing," he said one day, smiling. "I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself." "I told you," the farmer replied. "They just needed a little love." 2 puppies were already crawling confidently, a third was trying to get up on his paws, and the rest were weaker, but alive. Lyra had strengthened noticeably. Her eyes, recently full of pain, now glowed with tranquility. Sometimes she just lay there, watching her children move nearby, and quietly whined, as if singing them a lullaby. One morning the farmer went out into the yard. For the first time in a long while, he inhaled the cool air without fear. The sun was rising over the fields, and the barking of dogs drifted from afar. He looked at his house. Soft reddish light from the lamp poured from the window, and behind it, the small silhouettes of the puppies flickered. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, "for not leaving us." At that moment, neighbors approached the gates. A woman with a child in her arms smiled timidly. "Can we have a look?" "We heard they already opened their eyes." The farmer nodded. "Of course, come in, just be quiet, they are still skittish." When they entered, the room filled with children's laughter. The child carefully reached out a hand, and one of the puppies, the very one that had opened his eyes first, crawled up to him and licked his fingers. Everyone laughed. "You see," said Harris, who was standing by the door. "This is what life means. Not a monstrous sign, just a force that doesn't give up." The farmer nodded, looking at the doctor with gratitude. "You saved them." "No," Harris answered. "It was you who saved them. You and her." He looked at Lyra, who was lying by the stove, and added, "I only helped a little." That evening, when the sun was setting behind the hills, the farmer sat by the door and watched as the puppies, clumsy and stumbling, ran across the floor, played, fell, and rose again. One of them suddenly raised his muzzle and barked loudly, confidently, "For real." The farmer laughed, tears shining on his cheeks. "Well then," he said, the first voice. "That means everything will be fine." Lyra looked at him, wagged her tail, and laid her head on her paws. Her eyes spoke without words, "We did it." And in that moment, the farmer realized, sometimes miracles are born not from magic, but from pain, love, and persistence. Several weeks passed. Spring entered full force, and the little house breathed joy once again. The puppies were already running confidently around the yard, tripping over the grass, getting tangled in tails, and playing under the clear sky. Lyra sat under a tree. Observing them with that calm gaze in which a mother's pride could be read, the farmer stood nearby, leaning against the fence. His face, tired but bright, reflected everything they had gone through: fear, sleepless nights, pain, and finally, victory. He smiled when one of the puppies ran up, pressed against his leg, and looked up at him. "You remember, don't you?" he said, bending down quietly. "We promised not to give up. And we didn't surrender." At this time, Dr. Harris walked up without his coat, just in a jacket with a mug of coffee in his hands. He looked at the puppies and sighed with a slight smile. "I never would have thought I would witness such a thing." The farmer chuckled. "This isn't science, doctor, it is life." Harris nodded. "Yes, life is exactly as it should be. Stubborn, alive, and grateful." They stood silently, watching as one of the little ones jumped over a log, and another pulled his brother's ear. The wind stirred the grass, and the sun laid soft highlights on the puppy's fur. "Have you noticed," Harris said quietly, "that the village doesn't whisper anymore, now they call them a miracle?" The farmer grinned. "Let it be so. The main thing is that they are living." He looked at Lyra. She turned her head and met his gaze. In that look was everything: gratitude, strength, and peace. And in that second, the farmer understood that the fears were gone, only life remained. Warm, real, life that they had suffered for together.